7-year-old boy reveals terrifying secrets about Da Vinci's painting, The Last Supper. The class of second graders shuffled through the hushed gallery of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, their whispered voices and occasional giggles echoing off the high ceilings. Mrs. Wilson reminded them for the third time to keep their hands to themselves as they approached the Renaissance exhibit, a special traveling collection on loan from European museums. Oliver Bennett hung back from the group, his attention caught by the colors and textures of each painting they passed. Unlike his classmates, who were more interested in when lunch would be served, Oliver had been anticipating this field trip for weeks. His mother, Rachel, a professor of art history at Boston University, had filled their home with art books and reproductions of famous works. At 7, Oliver could already identify more painters by their style than most adults. "Keep up, Oliver," Mrs. Wilson called, noticing him lingering before a Botticelli. He jogged to catch up with his classmates, who had gathered before a large, illuminated reproduction of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. The original was too fragile to travel, but this meticulously created replica captured the essence of the masterpiece, down to the cracks and fading that centuries had imposed on the original. Mrs. Wilson began her prepared speech about the painting's biblical significance, but her words faded into the background as Oliver stepped closer to the artwork. Something about the scene captured his complete attention. The arrangement of the apostles, the subtle hand gestures, the perspective lines drawing the eye to Christ at the center. "Oliver!" Mrs. Wilson's voice seemed to come from far away. "Oliver, please step back behind the line." But Oliver couldn't move. His eyes were fixed on the painting, particularly on the tablecloth with its intricate folds and the subtle interplay of light and shadow. Something about it seemed wrong, or not wrong exactly, but incomplete, as if there was more to see than what was visible. "There's writing," he said suddenly, his voice clear in the quiet gallery, "hidden in the cloth." Mrs. Wilson sighed. "Oliver, please rejoin the group. We need to move on to— No, look." Oliver pointed toward the bottom left corner of the painting, at a section of the tablecloth that draped over the table edge. "There are letters there, L, D, V, I, N, and numbers too, 5 to 1 to a 19 to 16. The docent, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward with interest. "What did he say?" Mrs. Wilson began to apologize for the interruption, but the docent waved her off, kneeling beside Oliver. "What do you see in the painting, young man?" Oliver pointed again, tracing his finger in the air along the folds of the painted tablecloth. "The letters are hidden in the pattern of the cloth. Leonardo put them there so the church wouldn't find them. And there," he shifted his attention to the architectural details painted in the background, "that's not the right architecture. It's been changed. The original had symbols in the arches." The docent's expression shifted from polite interest to confusion. He studied the reproduction and then looked back at Oliver. "How do you know this?" Oliver blinked, suddenly seeming to return to himself. He shrugged. "I just see it." That evening, Rachel Bennett received 2 calls, one from Mrs. Wilson expressing concern about Oliver's disruption at the museum, and another, more surprising one, from Dr. Eliza Morgan, the museum's curator of European art, who had heard about the incident from the docent. "Your son identified details that aren't visible to the naked eye, Dr." Morgan explained, her voice tinged with excitement. "Some of what he described aligns with recent findings from advanced imaging studies of the original in Milan. I'd like to speak with him, if you're comfortable with that." Rachel glanced across the living room to where Oliver sat at the coffee table, drawing intently in his sketchbook, oblivious to the conversation about him. Since returning from the museum, he had been unusually quiet, focusing entirely on his artwork. "Oh, I'll have to discuss it with my husband," Rachel replied, watching Oliver with growing concern. "He's only 7. After hanging up, Rachel crossed the room and peered over Oliver's shoulder. Her breath caught in her throat. On the page was an astonishingly detailed recreation of The Last Supper, not as it appeared in reproductions, but with subtle differences. The architecture in the background contained symbols embedded in the arches. The apostles' positions were slightly altered, and, most disturbing of all, the figure of Judas was rendered with a dark shadow eclipsing half his face, a detail not present in the known version of the painting. "Oh, Oliver, sweetheart," Rachel said carefully, "this is beautiful, but it's different from the painting we know." Oliver didn't look up, his small hand continuing to add details with remarkable precision. "This is what it really looked like, before they made him change it." A chill ran down Rachel's spine. Who made who change what, Oliver? The church made Leonardo change the painting. They didn't like what he was really showing. He finally looked up at his mother, his eyes serious. He had to hide the real meaning. When Michael Bennett returned home from his psychology practice an hour later, he found Rachel waiting in the kitchen, Oliver's drawing laid out on the table between them. "He's never been to Italy," Rachel said without preamble. "He's never seen the original, only reproductions in books. And even those don't show these details because they don't exist in the version we know." Michael studied the drawing with a professional eye, noting both the extraordinary skill it displayed and the troubling intensity it suggested. "Could he have seen this version in one of your books? Maybe a theorized original version?" Rachel shook her head. "No art historian has proposed these specific changes. Some of this aligns with recent findings using multispectral imaging, but those results haven't been published in anything accessible to the public, let alone in children's books." "What did he say about it?" "That this is what the painting really looked like before Leonardo was forced to change it." Rachel lowered her voice. "And Michael, he's been talking in his sleep, in Italian, Renaissance Italian, from what I can make out." Michael rubbed his forehead, his training as a psychologist warring with his instincts as a father. "Kids can pick up all sorts of information without us realizing. Maybe a documentary you watched while he was in the room. Or something at school." "This isn't just regurgitated information," Rachel insisted. "The museum curator wants to meet with him because he identified details that only specialists using advanced technology have discovered." That night, they stood in the doorway of Oliver's room, watching him sleep. For the past hour, he had been murmuring in an archaic form of Italian, his hands twitching as if painting in his dreams. "I think we should take Dr. Morgan up on her offer," Michael said quietly. Maybe she can shed some light on what's happening." Rachel nodded, unable to shake the feeling that the secrets of a 500-year-old painting had somehow found their way into her little boy's mind, demanding to be revealed. The next morning, they found Oliver already awake and drawing. This time, it wasn't a reproduction of The Last Supper, but a detailed sketch of what appeared to be a workshop, an artist's studio from centuries past, complete with period-specific tools, easels, and a window looking out on a distinctly Italian Renaissance cityscape. "Oliver," Michael asked gently, "what are you drawing now?" "Leonardo's workshop in Milan," Oliver replied without looking up, "where he planned the real painting before they made him change it." Rachel and Michael exchanged glances over their son's head. Whatever was happening went beyond a child's imagination, or even an unusual artistic talent. It was as if Oliver had somehow gained access to knowledge lost to time, or deliberately hidden from history. Dr. Eliza Morgan arrived at the Bennetts' home 2 days later, her professional curiosity barely contained. She brought with her a portfolio of high-resolution images of The Last Supper and the most recent findings from conservation efforts in Milan. "I've been studying Leonardo for 20 years," she explained as they sat in the living room, Oliver absorbed in a new drawing nearby. "Toof, but what your son described at the museum, it aligns with discoveries we've only made in the past few months using multispectral imaging technology." She opened her laptop and pulled up a series of enhanced images. "These show what we believe might be hidden text in the tablecloth." Exactly where Oliver pointed. "Tradituizo. The sequence is still being analyzed, but preliminary results suggest it could be a form of coded message, not uncommon for Leonardo, who often wrote in mirror script and employed various ciphers in his work." Rachel leaned closer to the screen. "And the architectural details Oliver mentioned? That's where it gets even more interesting." Dr. Morgan pulled up another image. "Recent restoration work has revealed evidence that the background architecture was indeed altered. Possibly after Leonardo completed the work, we found traces of earlier paint layers that suggest the original composition included additional elements in the archways." Michael, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "With all due respect, Dr. Morgan, while this is fascinating, it doesn't explain how our son could know these things." "I understand your concern," she replied. "I'm not here to suggest anything supernatural. Children can be remarkably perceptive, sometimes noticing details adults miss, and prodigious artistic talent often comes with heightened visual processing abilities." As they spoke, Oliver had completed his drawing and now approached, holding out his sketchbook. "I finished the notebook page," he said. Dr. Morgan accepted the sketchbook, her professional composure slipping as she examined the drawing. It depicted what appeared to be a page from one of Leonardo's notebooks, complete with his distinctive mirror script handwriting and anatomical sketches in the margins. But the central image was a detailed study for The Last Supper, with annotations about symbolic elements and mathematical proportions. "This is extraordinary," she murmured. "The handwriting is remarkably similar to Leonardo's. And these proportions, they follow the golden ratio exactly as Leonardo employed it." She looked up at Oliver. "How did you know to draw this?" Oliver shrugged, the gesture disarmingly childlike in contrast to the sophisticated work he'd produced. "I see it when I close my eyes, like memories, but not my memories." Dr. Morgan's visit stretched to 3 hours as she showed Oliver various images of Leonardo's work. With each one, he provided insights or details that aligned with recent scholarly findings or ongoing debates in art historical circles. When she finally left, she pressed her card into Rachel's hand. "I'd like to introduce Oliver to a colleague, Dr. Alessandro Venturi, from the University of Florence. He's the leading expert on Leonardo's Milanese period, and specifically The Last Supper. He happens to be giving a lecture series at Harvard next week." After Dr. Morgan departed, Michael closed the door and turned to Rachel, his expression troubled. "This is becoming something bigger than we anticipated." Rachel nodded, watching Oliver, who had returned to his drawing. "What choice do we have? If he does have some special insight into this artwork, for whatever reason, don't we owe it to him to explore it?" "I'm concerned about the attention," Michael replied. "He's 7, Rachel. What happens if this becomes public? The media, the scrutiny, the expectations. It could overwhelm him." Their conversation was interrupted by Oliver's exclamation from the living room. "I found it." They hurried to join him and found he'd created yet another drawing, This one of what appeared to be a map of a church interior, with a specific area marked with an X. Next to it, he'd drawn a small book or notebook tucked into what looked like a hidden compartment in a wall. "What did you find, sweetheart?" Rachel asked. "Leonardo's secret notebook. The one with the real studies." Oliver pointed to his drawing. "He hid it in the church, behind the painting, but not directly behind. To the side, in a hollow space in the wall. He knew they might destroy it if they found it." Dr. Alessandro Venturi was a tall, elegant man with silver hair and the animated gestures of someone who had spent his life in Italy. He met with the Bennetts in his temporary office at Harvard, his initial skepticism giving way to astonishment as he reviewed Oliver's drawings. "Sabim twice, said, Hide. This architectural layout," he said, pointing to Oliver's drawing of Leonardo's workshop, "is consistent with historical records of Leonardo's studio in Milan, but with details that appear in no public documentation I know of." He looked up at Rachel and Michael. "Has your son been to Milan?" "Visited Santa Maria delle Grazie, where the original painting is located." "Never," Rachel replied. "He's never been to Italy at all." Dr. Venturi turned his attention to Oliver, who was quietly examining a book of Leonardo's anatomical drawings from the professor's collection. "Oliver," he said gently, "may I ask you some questions about Leonardo and his painting?" Oliver nodded, closing the book. "Can you tell me why Leonardo included 13 panels in the background of The Last Supper?" Oliver considered the question. He didn't, originally. There were supposed to be 12 panels, one for each apostle. The 13th was added later because they thought 13 was an unlucky number for Jesus and the 12 apostles to sit beneath. Dr. Venturi's eyebrows rose. And the original background? What did it contain instead? Symbols in the arches. Astrological signs and mathematical patterns. They made him paint over them because they said it was pagan. The professor made a note. Who is seated at Jesus' right hand in the painting? In the painting everyone sees, it's John. But Leonardo meant it to be Mary Magdalene. They made him change that too. This statement, a controversial theory popularized by recent fiction but dismissed by most serious scholars, made Dr. Venturi frown. "And how do you know this, Oliver?" The boy's response was simple and disarming. "Because I remember." After nearly 2 hours of increasingly specific questions, Dr. Venturi asked to speak with Rachel and Michael privately. Oliver was given a sketchbook and allowed to draw in an adjacent room, visible through a glass partition. "I have spent my entire career studying Leonardo da Vinci," Dr. Venturi began, his voice low. "What your son knows, or believes he knows, includes details that align with our most recent research, but also elements that challenge established scholarship. Some of what he describes matches theories that have never been proven." "Such as," Michael prompted. "The suggestion about Mary Magdalene, for instance, has been popularized by fiction but lacks scholarly support. However," he hesitated, "some of his other claims about alterations to the original composition do align with technical evidence. The recent multispectral imaging has revealed multiple pentimenti, changes made during or after the painting process." "What about the notebook Oliver claims Leonardo hid in the church?" Rachel asked. Dr. Venturi shook his head. "No such notebook has ever been discovered, but it's true that many of Leonardo's papers were lost over the centuries. We know he filled thousands of pages with notes and sketches, of which only a fraction survive today." He looked through the glass at Oliver, who was focused intently on his drawing. I'm traveling back to Milan next week. With your permission, I'd like to show these drawings to my colleagues there. We're in the midst of a new conservation assessment of The Last Supper, and Oliver's insights might prove valuable. That night, after Oliver was asleep, Rachel found Michael in their home office, researching cases of children with unusual abilities or knowledge they couldn't have acquired through normal means. "What do you think is happening?" she asked, sitting beside him. Michael sighed, closing his laptop. "Too scientifically speaking, I don't know. There are documented cases of children with detailed knowledge of historical events or places they've never been exposed to. Some researchers attribute it to cryptomnesia, forgotten memories of information encountered briefly. Others suggest more unconventional explanations. Like reincarnation, Rachel asked, the word feeling strange on her tongue despite her academic background. "I'm a psychologist, not a parapsychologist," Michael replied with a small smile. "But I can't dismiss what we're seeing. Oliver knows things he shouldn't know." Their conversation was interrupted by a sound from upstairs. They found Oliver sitting up in bed, his eyes open but unfocused, speaking rapidly in Renaissance Italian. Michael recorded a portion on his phone before gently waking their son. The next morning, Rachel had a linguistics colleague translate the recording. The results sent another chill through both parents. "He's describing an argument with a church official about the composition of The Last Supper," Rachel told Michael, her hands shaking slightly as she held the translation. "Chief, he, or Leonardo, I suppose, is defending his artistic choices and complaining about demands to alter specific elements of the painting." 2 weeks later, the Bennett family arrived in Milan. The decision to make the journey hadn't been easy, but Oliver's obsession with The Last Supper had only intensified. He'd filled 3 sketchbooks with drawings, detailed studies of the painting, Leonardo's workshop, and the church of Santa Maria delle Grazie. Most disturbing was his map showing the exact location where he insisted Leonardo had hidden his secret notebook. Dr. Venturi met them at their hotel, his normally composed demeanor betraying excitement. "I've arranged special access to Santa Maria delle Grazie tomorrow morning before it opens to the public." Chainsen, the conservation team, will be present, and they're cautiously interested in Oliver's insights. That night, Oliver could barely sleep, his anticipation palpable. "We'll find it tomorrow," he told his parents as they tucked him in. "A Leonardo wants us to find it." "Leonardo has been gone for a very long time, sweetheart," Rachel said gently. Oliver shook his head with the certainty only a child could possess. "Not all of him. Some parts stay." The church of Santa Maria delle Grazie was hushed and cool in the early morning light. Dr. Senantuariui Venturi led them through the refectory where The Last Supper covered the north wall, a faded, damaged masterpiece that had survived centuries, bombings, and the ravages of Leonardo's own experimental technique. Oliver stood transfixed before the painting, his small face solemn with concentration. The conservation team, along with the church's art director, Dr. Sofia Ricci, watched with professional skepticism tempered by curiosity. "It's different now," Oliver finally said. "Faded, and they changed so much." Dr. Ricci stepped forward. "Shoo. What do you see that was changed, Oliver?" Oliver approached the wall, pointing carefully without touching. The symbols in the archways were painted over. The positions of the apostles. Hands were altered. They were making signs that told a different story. And there, He pointed to a section of the wall about 2 meters to the right of the painting. "That's where the notebook is." Dr. Ricci exchanged glances with Dr. Venturi. This specific claim could be investigated. The section of wall Oliver indicated was part of the original structure from Leonardo's time. "We can examine that area with ground-penetrating radar," she said. "It's non-invasive and won't damage the historic structure." Permission was quickly granted, and by afternoon, a conservator arrived with portable scanning equipment. The results caused a stir among the assembled experts. The scan revealed an anomaly in the wall, a small cavity approximately 15 centimeters square, located exactly where Oliver had pointed. "This could be anything," Dr. Ricci cautioned. "These old buildings have many structural irregularities." But the coincidence was too striking to ignore. After consultations with preservation authorities, permission was granted for a minimally invasive examination using an endoscopic camera inserted through a tiny existing crack in the wall's surface. The tension was palpable as the camera probe was carefully maneuvered into the space. The feed from the camera showed only darkness at first, then revealed what appeared to be a small leather-bound object wrapped in oilcloth. "Dio mio," Dr. Ricci whispered. Extracting the object required delicate work by conservators, who carefully widened the crack just enough to remove the package without damaging the historic wall. When finally retrieved, it proved to be exactly what Oliver had described: a small notebook, its leather binding cracked with age, wrapped in oilcloth that had protected it from the worst ravages of time. Rachel and Michael watched in astonishment as Oliver nodded with satisfaction, as if he'd simply been waiting for confirmation of something he already knew. The notebook was immediately transferred to a conservation facility, where it was carefully opened and examined under controlled conditions. The Bennetts and Dr. Venturi were permitted to observe as the specialists gently separated the fragile pages. Inside were sketches and notes in Leonardo's distinctive handwriting, preliminary studies for The Last Supper that differed significantly from the final version. The drawings showed architectural elements with embedded astrological symbols, alternative arrangements of the apostles, and detailed notes written in Leonardo's characteristic mirror script. Most significantly, one sketch labeled Prima Versione, first version, showed a composition remarkably similar to what Oliver had drawn weeks earlier in Boston. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Venturi murmured, his voice thick with emotion. These sketches suggest Leonardo's original conception was indeed altered, possibly due to pressure from his patrons or church authorities. The discovery sent ripples through the art historical community. Preliminary authentication confirmed the notebook was genuine, dating to the late 15th century and bearing all the hallmarks of Leonardo's hand. More controversial were the implications for how scholars understood The Last Supper and Leonardo's relationship with religious authorities of his time. For the Bennetts, the academic furor was secondary to their concern for Oliver. After the discovery, their son's obsession seemed to dissipate almost overnight. He still enjoyed drawing, but returned to age-appropriate subjects: dinosaurs, spaceships, and their family cat. The nocturnal episodes of speaking Renaissance Italian ceased entirely. "It's like he completed a mission," Rachel observed one evening, watching Oliver play normally with Legos in their hotel room. Once the notebook was found, he was released from whatever connection he had. Before leaving Milan, they had one final private viewing of The Last Supper. Oliver stood before it calmly, admiring it with the appreciation of a child who loved art, but without the uncanny intensity of previous encounters. "Mintiuano, are you disappointed the painting was changed from Leonardo's original idea?" Rachel asked him. Oliver considered the question with a child's directness. No. He understood why it had to be different. but he still wanted people to someday know what he really thought. "And how do you know that, Oliver?" Michael asked gently. Oliver shrugged. "I just do. But I don't hear him anymore. He's quiet now." 3 months after their return to Boston, the preliminary findings about the notebook were published in an academic journal, crediting an unusually perceptive young art enthusiast for leading researchers to the discovery. The Bennetts had insisted on keeping Oliver's identity private, protecting him from the media attention that would inevitably follow. Dr. Morgan visited them again, bringing a special children's book about Leonardo as a gift for Oliver. "The technical analysis of the notebook has been fascinating," she told Rachel and Michael. "The pigment studies match known materials from Leonardo's workshop, and some of the hidden text Oliver identified in the tablecloth has been partially decoded. It appears to be a mathematical sequence related to musical harmonies, another of Leonardo's passions." "Have you formed a theory about how Oliver knew these things?" Michael asked. Dr. Morgan smiled. "Science has its limits. Perhaps some mysteries aren't meant to be fully explained." She watched Oliver paging through the book she'd brought. "Sure. Though I will say, the human mind, especially a child's mind, has capacities we're only beginning to understand." After she left, Rachel found Oliver studying a reproduction of The Last Supper in the book, his expression thoughtful. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The connection you felt." Oliver looked up with a smile that was wholly her 7-year-old son's. "Sometimes, but it was getting kind of crowded in my head with both of us there." As years passed, Oliver retained no conscious memory of the specific details he'd revealed about The Last Supper, though he developed into a talented young artist with a particular affinity for Renaissance techniques. The notebook, now known in academic circles as the Milan Manuscript, continued to yield insights into Leonardo's creative process and the historical constraints under which he worked. On Oliver's 13th birthday, Dr. Venturi sent him a letter accompanying a special gift, a beautifully bound facsimile of the recovered notebook, published in a limited edition for museums and scholars. His inscription read, "To Oliver, who reminded us that some connections transcend our understanding of time and consciousness. The truth of great art always finds a way to reveal itself." Oliver traced the reproduced sketches with appreciation, but without recognition. The mysteries they had once unlocked in his mind, now sealed again behind the veil that separates what we know from what we have perhaps only momentarily glimpsed.